Well, good morning, everyone. And I want to give a big thanks to our witnesses from St. Paul, North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale, Roseville, and Stillwater schools for helping us today by providing testimony about how the American Rescue Plan is being implemented in our school districts. I want to thank you for your service to our community, especially during the ongoing pandemic. Students, families, staff, teachers, administrators, you've all done the very best you can to get through this most challenging time in a generation. It's important, I believe, to look back at what we faced in 2020, our communities across the country, every nation around the world, while we were facing an unprecedented pandemic. It stressed our healthcare system almost to a breaking point, closed our schools, crippled our economy, and exposed all of the social, economic, and religious and radical divides that undermine our civil society and the well-being of tens of millions of Americans. We were in a crisis. At the same time, our country then was run by a president who propagated his own chaos, rejected science, and failed to respond to this pandemic in a timely fashion. I want to be clear, I fully realize that this crisis is not over with yet. Despite the progress, families, schools, and our democracy, they're still struggling. My Democratic House colleagues and I stepped up to work with President Biden and local communities, hand in hand, to provide federal funding and the tools to build back better for families. We, together, working with the communities, we saved lives, jobs, businesses, and prevented many families from falling into poverty or falling deeper into poverty. We've made progress from a year ago, but the Omicron variant has forced us all to recalibrate, especially in our schools. I want to commend Governor Walz for his encouraging vaccines and testing at schools. And I hope for those of you who work this into your plans, it is going well for you. Or let me know what we can do better, especially with testing over the coming months. Our students have endured much during this crisis. And many of you know that not only from a professional standpoint, but a personal standpoint as well. I know you're doing all you can to help your students with their social, emotional, and any other needs that they're facing right now. Keeping children in school is a priority, but we all know it has to be done safely. We're asking a lot of our schools, and as members of Congress, it's our job to make sure you have the resources you need. My House colleagues and I acted to build back better from the darkest days of the pandemic. Last March, we passed the American Rescue Plan, delivering $8.5 billion to Minnesota to speed up vaccine distribution, testing, and boost small businesses, to give them the relief that they needed to weather this pandemic. We work to keep food on the table for many of our families, and we work to help them stay sheltered or in their homes. We kept kids and educators safe the best we could in schools, and we allowed local governments to be able to continue their essential services. The law made a down payment, and it cut child poverty in half by expanding the child tax credit and making it fully refundable. Sadly, this has expired because the extension was blocked by Republicans in the Senate. And there was a fabulous story, if you haven't heard it yet, on Minnesota Public Radio about what a difference that the child tax credit made to families all across our country. And there's one family from Minnesota included in the story. We also work to provide funding for affordable childcare and increase resources for Head Start and so much more. The second thing we did is we acted to invest in rebuilding America's crumbling infrastructure, including $7 billion for the state of Minnesota. We are delivering on that bipartisan infrastructure bill, and it's going to create millions of good paying jobs and union jobs, rebuilding America's infrastructure. Third, we're acting to build back better for the future, to lower costs, to fight inflation, and to strengthen working families. Together, the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill would create an average of 2 million jobs each year over the next decade. Good paying jobs, I might add. I'm proud that House Democrats are working to address these challenges in the Build Back Better Act. Once again, we face obstruction from Republicans in the House and the Senate in order to be able to fully meet the needs of our communities. So that obstruction has consequences, which was clearly evident in the loss of the child tax credit lifeline for millions of families across this country. But today, I want to reaffirm our work together. I look forward to hearing from each of you about how the historic federal investments from the American Rescue Plan is meeting significant challenges right here in our community. The law is delivering here in the 4th District a total of $224 million for our cities, $107 million for Ramsey County, and $50 million for my parts of in Washington County, and $284 million in aids for school districts in the 4th District to help our schools prioritize safety for students, teachers, and faculty, and deliver the best education possible. St. Paul schools received $207 million, Stillwater, $2 million, North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale, $15 million, and Roseville, $13 million. This law is delivering $130 billion to state education departments to help schools stay open safely and make up for the valuable learning time that our children have lost in this pandemic. As you know, the American Rescue Plan consists of 3 categories of funding: K through 12 schools, $1.23 billion for the Elementary and Secondary Education Relief Fund, $3 billion for the emergency assistance to non-public schools. We want all of our children to succeed. And $3 billion for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. Together, the American Rescue Plan provided $1.4 billion for Minnesota K through 12 schools and provides the essential resources necessary for Minnesota Department of Education and our school districts to keep schools open and safely. And yes, focus on how we can make up for the disruptive learning. I want you to know that I am proud of the historic achievement in being able to deliver this with our Democratic delegation in Congress to Minnesota students. I'm going to turn over to each one of you, but before I do that, many of you probably are fully aware of this, but with all the complexity of returning to school and the recovery that many schools were worried that they would be unable to get adequate head counts for eligible students and would receive less funding than they needed from the Impact Aid program. So last week, Congress passed and President Biden signed into law a supplemental Impact Aid flexibility, which will allow school districts to use the student head count from 2021-2022 school year, which has already been calculated for their Impact Aid implications for the 2022 and 2023 school year, which are due on January 31st, 2020. There's a lot of 20s and 22s in there. Bottom line is that you will be held harmless for the disruption that you are facing so that you can continue to provide the very best you can for our schools.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for this invitation today. You know, I knew that back at the start of the pandemic that you were going to continue to be a voice for District 4, for St. Paul Public Schools specifically. You have shown time after time that you are aware of the key issues in our school district, and you have advocated for us in great ways. So appreciate your ongoing support. We in St. Paul Public Schools created an office to oversee this with $207 million. I thought that it would be much too challenging to have those leaders and staff who are focused on the recovery from the pandemic to also be making decisions, organizing, working with us to communicate our plan. So very much wanted to look at different areas of expertise from our district to have them manage our ARP efforts in the district. And it's been a really good decision. We have been able to rely on people to obviously make sure that we're following the law, that we're able to communicate with our community, and most importantly, that the funds are going towards the efforts that they're intended to, which is something that's obviously important to us. The last one that I will mention, though, goal number 4, we thought it was really important to call out social emotional learning, mental health supports. to support our students, not only our students in our district impacted by the pandemic, but we have to think about the racial unrest that has been taking place in our community. We have to think about, Congresswoman, your office being under attack a little bit more than a year ago. And we need to think about the impact that that's had on our communities, both far and near as well. So something very important to us is that we called that out to ensure that our community knew that we've got to think about the hearts and minds of our students together in terms of how we're going to build back from this moment in time. So I wanted to share with you the unique strategies, the 51 unique strategies, not all 51, of course, but we have 51 unique strategies that we're using, in our district. And again, spreading those dollars out and making sure that we are trying to address as many of the things that we heard and gathered and themes from our needs assessment continues to be the main driver for us. It's allowed for us to add to the well-being, the safety of our buildings with indoor air quality, adding staff, making sure that we're addressing that. As you know, Congresswoman, some of our buildings are 150 years old, and they've gone through many updates, but as a whole, our portfolio of schools are very old. And I'm really proud of the investments we've been able to make. And with this investment from the ARP plan, it's helping us to really bolster what we've already committed to doing in our buildings. You can see that community partnerships are a big part of this that I want to point out. I said very early to our team that this was an opportunity for us to partner with our community in a new way. Many times we're able to partner with those organizations that are ready to provide supports, but there might be a limit to what they're able to do. So this investment allows us to support our community partners to build their wealth as well, to hire additional people, to undergo additional training so that they can be ready and willing partners with school districts. I very much saw it as a way for us to help our community, help us, as I've said many times, to our staff. So that will be an ongoing effort that we make as well in terms of how we look to our community to be there in this time that we really need them. Equity is something that I think you'll find in every school district plan in the state, I would hope. But for us, we definitely wanted to make that be more of a systems approach so that we could address everything from learning to the social emotional well-being, so that we could ensure that each of our buildings, each of our students, each of our families felt that they could be supported in the ways that they need. Of course, our nutrition services staff, we went through serving 17 million meals while we were shut down, to making sure that we can provide access to students and families who need it in times that we're on break, in times that we can, look for those extra investments to ensure that our schools that our students and families have the food that they need. Additional school counselors and additional health service, again, have been two areas that we've expanded on as well to meet, these increasing needs. Very quickly, we'll go through the strategy highlights. I mentioned some of these, but these are kind of the buckets of areas that we really look to invest, because we wanted to make sure that we could have several efforts tied together so that we could truly make some movement. And one that I'll highlight is the one right in the middle: K-8 reading and math specialists, and what we're calling WIN teachers, what I need now. Didn't really want to focus on what our students have lost. We want to focus on what our students need right now and build with them in their math and reading comprehension by adding staff who can go in and partner with teachers, who can be in the classroom and be ready.
As we talk about this incredible COVID relief funding that we've received, I want to think about the bigger picture as well. I feel like right now, more than ever, there's a real fragility to our democracy and to public education. And I think some of the things we're seeing is how critically important the education of our young people is. And yet, when we have political and economic disruptions in our country, really, it's a little worrisome to me that our public education systems can be so fragilely impacted by some of those waves that we're feeling. And I think, I'll just say when the polarization we're feeling in our country right now, and when you think about the elected officials who are so amazingly giving of their time and energy, not only from the Congress level, but all the way down to our school board level. You know, it's a really difficult time to be a school board member. It's a pretty thankless job. And in the way of our times right now, it's kind of a risky job sometimes as well. And so I just want to speak to, first and foremost, what I feel is the most urgent issue of our times is protecting public education, truly protecting it. We've talked in the past about the dependency on political leadership to fund schools on a regular basis. And I feel like we kind of go with the wave of the tenor of what's happening at our state and federal leadership levels. But I have concerns about that. And I would love to advocate for us to continue to find ways to stabilize school funding and allow schools to really innovate and move in the way that we need to. So as we talk about our COVID relief funding that we've received, you know, we took a lot of learning from that first year of the pandemic. You know, we did a lot of research and studying of lessons learned during that time. We all knew that coming back to school for this current school year, 21-22, that we would face academic needs of students, right? We knew that for sure. We knew there would be mental health needs. We've been seeing that throughout. I think what none of us saw coming to the extent that we're facing right now is incredible disruption to the labor market, to the supply chain distribution. I think there's so many things that, you know, people think of those sometimes in the corporate world, in the business world, right? But it really affects schools. We are hundreds of $million organizations. And when there's a disruption in supply chain, everything's affected. So I want to give you a few examples about that and why this COVID relief funding has been so critically important to us. So it has buffered us so well in these current couple of years we're facing. I don't know what we would have done without this funding. So some examples. We all know there's this labor shortage out there, and I know people think about it in all kinds of industries, but I want to speak about it in the school system. I'm a school district with about 2,000 employees, and of those, about 850 or 900 are teachers. The rest are not teachers. There's so many people that go into the organization, right? We all know there's transportation, there's nutrition service workers, there's grounds crews, there's custodial crews. When we have a labor shortage, all the operations of our school districts really get interrupted. And many of you know, when we've had to do some school closures this winter, they've largely, of course, been due to COVID, but it's really the staffing shortages, the inability to run your bus routes, the inability to cover your classrooms. So we've had to really raise our rates of pay as we should. I gotta say this, when you have members of your community and organization, you wanna have livable wages. And when you're facing inflation rates as we are right now, livable wages, the bare minimum you can live on has really changed. So we've had to really adjust and increase our rates of pay for our hourly employees and for our substitute teachers and for so many layers of the support staff. And we're still short-staffed. One of the concerns I have is that we're doing these, in many cases, on a temporary basis. We have MOUs for 1 year or 2 years for these pay increases. I can't see a future where you can bring those rates of pay back down again, right? Once you have rates of pay happening, they're really hard to go back on that, as we shouldn't. And so the worry is, how do we sustainably fund the labor costs that go into education?
In Roseville, we wanted to outline how we've used the costs looking back and how we intend to use the costs moving forward, because the need does not end regardless of the pandemic. During this time, we've used the American Rescue Funds. We've provided no cost childcare between periods of distance learning for families of essential workers. Childcare for essential workers has been crucial in keeping our hospitals and emergency services running throughout the pandemic. We've provided full-time substitute teachers and paraprofessionals to help cover the many absences caused by illness and related quarantine and isolation during a time when there has been significant shortage of substitutes. We've also provided one-to-one technology devices for students during distance learning, including hotspots that have provided internet access to families who could not afford it. Additional social and emotional learning supports have been provided to all students, and including additional social workers in all of our schools. We've added interventions to boost learning for students who have been negatively impacted by learning loss, an additional chemical health counselor at the secondary level, And we've covered the added cost of increased nursing staff in relationship to COVID-19. We've made improvements to technology infrastructure equipment resulting from the significantly increased demands on our existing networks. And finally, in addition to funds provided by the American Rescue Plan, the USDA providing fully subsidized meals have been a benefit to all of our families. This allows our nutrition services staff to focus on securing food resources at a time when there are disruptions to the supply chain and meal distribution rather than focusing on student meal debt. So again, we're very, very grateful. And like others have shared, the need will certainly continue.
We've had a pandemic enrollment loss of about 300 students, or 4% of our student population, and that's a huge loss to our system. Students, every time students come through the door, it's carrying a little backpack of funding of about $10,000. So you can imagine that what that does to our resources and supports for our systems. And we are hoping that these students will choose to return to us, and once the pandemic has hopefully come to a close. We have received support for academic and student mental health, which has provided extra staffing in the means of teachers, school psychologists, interventionists. There's been funding for summer and community programs, intervention supports, extended day and summer support, and local pandemic response needs support. We have been able to hire temporary staffing such as online teachers, permanent substitute teachers, permanent substitute paraprofessionals, and building assets, reducing risks, or BAR coordinators, which has been a huge support. We've provided a robust summer enrichment program that I will expand on in just a minute, extra classroom materials, online programs and resources such as devices for students, hotspots for families that do not have access to the internet, and we've been able to provide the before and after school childcare.
One of the discussions that I had with Ramsey County and the city of St. Paul with some of their dollars is with Park and Rec and Wraparound Social Services, working with the school district for how you put together a summer program. And all of you have put together, summer programs that with the resources that you had and with the leadership from your elected community leaders, put together something that fit well for you. And that's the beauty, I think, of local government, having served on the city council, working with school boards, that we reflect at our best when we are listening to the communities we serve. And so I compliment all of you for, you have a core set of funding programs that you all did, but then you met the needs of your community by working with families, nonprofits in your communities, and your elected school board leaders. So to all the school board chairs and those that you serve, I have a fair amount of idea, having been on a small city council in North St. Paul, how much you are, the reward you receive is the smile on the students' faces and somebody saying thank you. It's not the monetary award. And I know how many hours you're putting in doing this. So I thank the superintendents, but please, to the school board members who are on here and school board chairs, thank your fellow board members when you go back from me, because it is a very, very important calling that you have all answered. And as been pointed out, when this pandemic became politicized, school boards and many times became ground zero for the politicalization, which is not what anybody signed up for. It's an honor and a privilege to work for the families in the 4th District and to serve alongside with you. We each have our own lane of responsibility, but these traffic lanes of responsibility have to work together in unison. And sometimes we merge into each other's lanes, and sometimes we have to put a blinker on saying, listen to me, this isn't where you belong right now. So I thank all of you for doing that, because that's the way we're going to move our communities and our states forward. And that's the way we're going to have our students feel that there's a whole world out there of opportunity. So as we navigate these challenges ahead, please know myself and my office stand ready to work with you. I know the work that you've done, and thank you for highlighting especially food and nutrition and meal services. I've been at school sites. I've been at, in St. Paul and in the suburban area. And it used to be that we had quote unquote summer feeding programs, but they didn't go the whole summer, right? Now we have food and nutrition programs that I believe we have a responsibility after we get through this COVID crisis to work with you to make sure that our young students, our young adults never feel food insecure. So I look forward to working with you on that and making sure that you have the resources working with nonprofit agencies to do that. Thank you for providing all the essential services and all the different ways your community wanted to during the pandemic. I just can't say enough for how much I know that you've done. You are the heart and the soul quite often of our communities, the interlocutors, and the community ed programs that you provide, and the things that you also provide for the vulnerable seniors in our community and people who want to energize as adults into the workforce and become prepared. We didn't even talk about any of that. That's been some of the lost opportunity that we need to get back, and I look forward to working with you. So with that, I know how busy you all are. Thank you for an hour of your precious time. I look forward to continue to working with you and to making sure that together we serve hope and opportunity for the future leaders of our community who are your students. Thank you very much.